On today's Palace of Pistons podcast, we're talking all about the Jaden Ivey injury, his status moving forward, the status of the Detroit Pistons, what type of roster moves may need to be made following the injury, all of that and more on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
And welcome back, folks, to another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe. It's just myself. It's Aaron Johnson here for a solo edition of the POP podcast. No Mike Anglano, no Jasper Apollonia. Both of them a little sick, under the weather. And so I'm going to fight it out here by myself, and we're going to have a show this week after what's been a very important stretch of Detroit Pistons basketball in both the very good and the very bad sense following what transpired in Detroit's win against the Orlando Magic on Wednesday night. There's so much to get into surrounding the Pistons. This was going to be trending to be a really positive podcast, considering the Pistons had won 4 of their last 5 games coming into this recording session. But obviously what transpired with Jaden Ivey in the fourth quarter of the game against the Magic on Wednesday definitely changes the tone and the tune around the Detroit Pistons right now. So we're going to go back through the Western Conference road trip for the Pistons. But before that, we're also going to talk about that Jaden Ivey unfortunate injury and what it's going to mean for him and the Detroit Pistons moving forward as the NBA season really stops for nothing. Before we do that, though, I do want to talk about and give a word to our weekly sponsor, and that's BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selections of odds on everything from football, NBA, college basketball, NHL, and UFC. Head to BetOnline today and don't forget to use our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. Again, our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for a welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Also, before we get into everything in what was a very busy stretch of Detroit Pistons basketball, make sure you're following, you're subscribed, wherever you're watching or listening to the podcast from. That's my resolution for you in 2025. If you've not subscribed, if you've not followed the show wherever you watch or listen to each week, you need to go and do that. We need your support. We need you to show love to the Palace of Pistons podcast in this new year. That's my New Year's resolution. I'm not going to try to sell you anything. It's completely free and it helps us tremendously. So please consider that as you listen along to this week's show. And let's start with what's on everybody's mind, and that's Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey in the fourth quarter of the Detroit Pistons win against the Orlando Magic on Wednesday night suffered what was later notified as a broken left fibula. Ivey underwent surgery on Thursday morning, and in the latest Detroit Pistons medical update, it was revealed that he will be reevaluated in 4 weeks. Important to note there that he will only be reevaluated. That does not mean he will be back in 4 weeks in terms of in practice, in terms of playing in games. It only means he'll be reevaluated. It could be good. It could be bad. There's no for sure one way or the other in regards to what that means for Jaden Ivey. And I want to start with the actual play itself. The play happens in the fourth quarter. Loose ball on the Pistons side. Jaden Ivey, Cole Anthony, both dive for it. Cole Anthony gets Ivey right in the knees. And the initial reaction from it looked like a lot of people was that it was an incredibly dirty play by Cole Anthony. And I want to start there because from being in the arena, from watching the play and watching how the players reacted, it just wasn't. It was not a dirty play. There was not ill intent. There was not malicious intent from Cole Anthony. He was trying to hurt Jaden Ivey. It was maybe a bit reckless the way he dove at the ball, but it wasn't with malice. And you could tell as people started to understand the severity of the situation that Cole Anthony was visually upset and was visually shaken up by what had transpired. He had several teammates consoling him. He tried really hard to just kind of get near Jaden Ivey after Ivey was eventually stretchered out of the arena off the court. And you could tell it just wasn't one of those plays. And if it were one of those plays, I think you would have seen a different reaction perhaps from the players on the court. But it was everyone understood what was having tried to be done on the court there. It was a play for a loose ball. Two guys were trying to make a high energy, high effort play to get at the ball. And the result of it was a really, really unfortunate injury for Jaden Ivey. I just want to clarify that because I don't think it wasn't great seeing the reaction on Twitter from the Pistons community talking about all of the bad things they want to happen to Cole Anthony after what happened. I just think that's just not, it's not necessary. So it wasn't a dirty play. Let's make that very clear. And that was, nobody walked into the press conference after the game and said anything other than that. Everyone understands two guys going for a loose ball, trying to make a winning play for their respective team. Again, another key question here is what's the future for Jaden Ivey? Is he going to play again this year? As I mentioned at the start of this discussion, underwent surgery on Thursday morning. The Pistons say that he'll be reevaluated in 4 weeks. After the game last night, I was there. JB Bickerstaff came in, Cade Cunningham came in, and both spoke. And, without providing any sort of timeline or anything like that, they both said, it's really essentially, paraphrasing that it really sucks. It's really unfortunate. But he's going to dominate the recovery road ahead for him and come out on the other side on top. They didn't give, any sort of timeline or anything like that. They probably didn't know right away, but it sounded severe. It sounded like a severe injury. And for the news to come out that he's going to be checked back on in 4 weeks and he went and had surgery right away, I think there's a little bit of hope in that regard that, hey, maybe he will be able to return at some point this year. You got to think of where we're at in the NBA calendar season. It's January, first of the year when this injury happens. He gets back in late March, early April. Are the Pistons in the playoffs? Are they playing meaningful games? Would his return impact this team in a serious way? And so Shams Charania of ESPN, who initially broke the news that it was a broken fibula for Jaden Ivey, reported that neither he nor the Pistons, he being Jaden Ivey, nor the Detroit Pistons, were ruling out a return to play this year. It all just kind of depends on where the Pistons are at, when or if Jaden Ivey is recovered and capable of returning to the court and playing on a nightly basis. So good news there, I would say. I think from the injury standpoint, obviously the initial fear is when someone grabs the knee, the leg, the ankle, you're thinking ACL, MCL, PCL. You're thinking the worst. You're thinking season ending, 8-9 month recovery. It affects them long term. Everything that I've read is that this injury, obviously the recovery timeline is a little bit lighter than some of those more severe injuries, but it also should not have a severe negative impact on his longevity, right? Like in terms of losing athleticism and speed and things like that. it doesn't sound like this is an injury that's going to ruin that for him or knock him down a peg or two. So I wouldn't be too concerned about anything like that. But on the opposite side, if you're the Pistons and you're 11 seed, 12 seed, 13 seed, and things trend in the wrong direction after losing Jaden Ivey, do you rush him back? I don't think they will. Shams Charania said that the Pistons are going to be cautious with his recovery and allow him that time to recover. And I think that makes all the sense in the world. To be quite frank, even if the Pistons are in the playoff hunt, I think it makes all the sense in the world to be very cautious with Jaden Ivey. Let's be real. Even if the Pistons get into the playoffs, they are at best an 8, 9, 10 seed. They're not going to be a 4 seed, home court advantage on the line in the last week or two of the season. It's just not going to be that way. So if they get in, great. But I don't think it's worth risking Jaden Ivey's health to rush him back if he's not fully healed. And I don't think they will, but I just want to make that abundantly clear from my point of view. I think what you have to start looking at as the NBA season keeps going, the Pistons are going to play again. They have the Charlotte Hornets Friday night. The NBA does not stop because a player gets hurt. It's just the unfortunate reality of the league. So you have to start thinking about what's next for the Detroit Pistons. And you have to start looking at how the rotation changes with this absence, with this major piece now out of the equation for the foreseeable future. It starts with the starting lineup. Look, Jaden Ivey was in a pretty good groove after coming back from an earlier injury. He's over his last little stretch was averaging 19 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists a game. Last night against the Magic was playing very, very well, had 22 points, made, I think, 5 3-pointers, was playing good basketball outside of a few turnovers. And so you have to figure out what's next for this rotation. There's a number of options to replace him in the starting lineup. I think if you looked on paper, your mind would probably trend right to Malik Beasley, who has been stellar this year for the Detroit Pistons. Off the bench, he's also started 8 games for him. So he has started when Jaden Ivey or Cade Cunningham has missed a game this year. Beasley on the season, 16.2 points per game, 3.1 rebounds, 1.8 assists. He's shooting over 41% from deep on over 9 attempts per game. I don't think it should be Malik Beasley to replace him in the starting lineup. That doesn't mean he won't. I certainly could see him being the guy that replaces Jaden Ivey in the starting lineup. But I think there's some other options. I think the next guy on the list would be Ausar Thompson. He's played 13 games now with the Pistons, averaging 18 minutes per game. His statistics are not necessarily great. 7.5 points on 47% shooting, only at 22% from the 3-point line. But nobody's going to give you, in terms of energy, defensive intensity, is going to run in transition, which is where this team is best offensively. So I think Ausar Thompson is definitely an option for Detroit. I think you can make a similar case for Ron Holland, who his minutes have kind of come and gone with Ausar Thompson back, and the Pistons just got Isaiah Stewart back. So, there's 2 additions to the rotation. They didn't have Simone Fontecchio against the Magic, and minutes were still a little sparse for Ron Holland. So maybe that gives the Pistons an opportunity to find a few more minutes for him, and maybe that's putting him in the starting lineup, letting him defend, letting him run in transition, really playing in that same mold of Ausar Thompson. I'd say a real dark horse candidate would be Wendell Moore Jr. I just don't anticipate it. He's, probably the last guy in Detroit's rotation right now behind Paul Reed. Only appeared in 13 games so far this year. Kind of a mixed bag when he's been on the court. Has had some nice performances, but has also had some duds. I just think he's, option 4 or 5 rather than option 1 or 2 to replace Jaden Ivey in the starting lineup. Here's my dark horse candidate to slide into the starting lineup. It's Marcus Sasser. 22 games this year, just under 6 points, shooting 40% from the three-point line, just under 2 assists per game and 13 minutes per game, at just under a steal per game as well in those 13 minutes. I've seen JB Bickerstaff, when he does go to Marcus Sasser, a lot of the time it's with Cade Cunningham on the court. And because it gives Cade that knockdown shooter, it gives another guy that can handle the ball a little bit, do some of the initiating on offense. With the way Cade Cunningham has performed defensively this year, they've been able to hide Marcus Sasser on someone else and, let Cade take perhaps a more difficult defensive assignment. So I think Marcus Sasser could be the dark horse candidate to slide into the starting lineup. And if I were JB Bickerstaff, that's who I would really, really take a gander at. Because I think if you're going to find minutes for Marcus Sasser, that makes the most sense. This is, still a team that even with Jaden Ivey was a little bit light on ball handling and a little bit light on lead guards. So I can understand the rebuttal of saying, well, you kind of only have 2 guys that can play point guard right now, and you're going to put both of them in the starting lineup. I get it, but you stagger them. Quite frankly, that's what you do. I just think it keeps the ecosystem for Malik Beasley the same, and it allows him to continue to come off the bench where he's played really, really well. Not that he can't start, but he's just had so much success this year. I don't know if you need to reinvent the wheel and change things up for him. And it gives Marcus Sasser, who has had some good moments, an opportunity. And if you're a team, again, I get it. They're in contention, but they're still 3 games below 500. It's not like they're, 20 and 13 and playing really good basketball and, or again, a 4, 5, 6 seed in the Eastern Conference. Like they're the 9th seed in the East right now with Philadelphia surging. Philadelphia right on their back. Philadelphia's won 7 of their last 10. So I think it gives a young player an opportunity to step in, and I think it worked for Detroit's rotation as well. Here's why I'm against moving Asar Thompson or Ron Holland into the starting lineup. You watch that Magic game, and you watch when the Pistons had Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren, or Asar Thompson and Isaiah Stewart on the court together. And the Magic did what every team should do. They sunk in on Asar Thompson. They gave him the Ben Simmons treatment, and the Pistons offense sputtered in those minutes. Asar Thompson did not play well offensively against the Orlando Magic. And I think more teams are going to give him that treatment until he shows that he can hit shots outside of dunks at the rim. I mean, that's what I would do if I was an NBA head coach. I'd stack the box. I'd have an extra help defender on Cade Cunningham's side of the floor, and I wouldn't worry about Asar Thompson. I'd watch him to make sure he's not cutting to the basket. But if he's going to dribble with the ball 24 feet from the rim, I'm going to sink my guy into the paint, and I'm going to watch him dribble until he proves that he can hit outside shots. I just don't think it's a great fit. Yes, he would help them defensively. Yes, he would help them on the glass. Yes, he could take the opposing team's top defensive assignment, but I just think offensively it would really, really hurt this team. A team that is struggling already to get great offense every night. They only scored 106 against Orlando. I'd just be weary of bringing in a negative shooting piece into that starting lineup. So that's where I'm at with the starting lineup. I think Marcus Sasser makes a ton of sense. I understand if you want to go Malik Beasley as well. I'm looking away from Ron Holland or Asar Thompson. Not that both of them are probably not going to see an uptick in minutes now, but I just don't think it makes sense with the group that Detroit starts on a nightly basis. So what happens to the rest of the roster, right? If Jaden Ivey's out until March or through the end of the season, like we said, they're light on ball handling. They're light on lead guards. Do they make a trade? Do they sign a free agent? I don't think this makes the Pistons need to go out and get a Zach LaVine or a Bradley Beal or someone, that's a big contract but could probably help this team. If you were going to make that move, you should have made it regardless of Jaden Ivey if you really thought that was the move. I don't think him going down changes my mind on that. I think Zach LaVine's had a really good season. I'm still awfully concerned about that contract. Bradley Beal, who's often injured, has a horrible contract, and is a mixed bag on the court, depending on the night, is a no-no. And I'd say that for most of these other guys that have been brought up as potential pieces in the trade market. That's not saying the Pistons shouldn't explore a trade. I still think this team would benefit from adding another guard. And they have a roster spot. They have cap space to make some sort of move. So what could they do in the trade market? Is there a guard out there that the Pistons could add to this team? And if I'm trading for a guard, am I trading for, a 13th, 14th, 15th man, or am I trading for someone that's going to play right away? Can the Pistons find a happy medium between, I'm sure they want to win these games with how JB Bickerstaff's coaching and how he's doling out minutes and how they've performed, right? They're in the play-in right now in the Eastern Conference. So I'm sure if they are going to make a trade, they'd like to add a guy that could help them on the court. I just don't know if it needs to be that big contract. Can they get a guy that's making $8, $10, $12 million a year rather than a guy making $25, $30, $35, $40 million a year? I haven't really looked at the market. I don't know how many guards are out there that are available to get. Ideally, it's not an off-ball guard. Ideally, it's a guy that can do some ball handling and stuff and can initiate some offense for this team. But I think if I'm Detroit and I'm going to be without Jaden Ivey for, at least best case scenario 4 weeks. I don't think he's going to be back in 4 weeks. But best case scenario, if I have to go 4 weeks without Jaden Ivey, I'm looking at getting something with how they're playing. Because they're clearly a middle-of-the-road team right now. 15-18, a schedule coming up, we'll talk about it here in a little bit, where they could string together a few more wins here. I think they owe it to themselves to continue to try to compete and continue to try to win games. I certainly wouldn't, look at this injury and be like, okay, well, there's our excuse to mail it in. There's our excuse to not try to win games. They owe it to themselves, and they owe it to Jaden Ivey, quite frankly, to keep playing hard, to keep winning games. That was a message that JB Bickerstaff and Cade Cunningham shared post-game. Like, a lot of the questioning was, how did you guys see what transpired, stand out on that court for what felt like eternity as they shielded Jaden Ivey as he was put onto a stretcher and then wheeled off the court? How did you guys go back out there and end up winning that basketball game? And there was a lot of talk about, having to do this for him, having to win that game for Jaden Ivey, because that's what he would do and that's what he would want of us. So I think they owe it to themselves to make a move, make a move that's going to help them. Doesn't have to be Zach LaVine. Maybe it will be. I don't know. I wouldn't think, but I think they should do something. And so maybe that ends up changing what the rotational changes are in the immediate. Maybe they make this move in a week, in 2 weeks. And so maybe that changes, whoever moves into the starting lineup or whoever sees more minutes in the rotation. Maybe that eventually changes once they add this guy, but I think they need to explore it. At least I would. Free agency-wise, it's really the same names that we've kind of talked about before. Gosh, even dating back into the offseason, really. Guys like Markelle Fultz, guys like Dennis Smith Jr., Those guys can do some nice things. Neither of them are great shooters. Jaden Ivey shooting 40% from the 3-point line this year. That's been one of his key skills, is his shooting ability this year. That's what's made him a much better player compared to last season, is that he was shooting 40% from the 3-point line. Like I said, he had 5 threes against the Magic last night, 5 of 6 from the 3-point line. So, yeah, they could go the free agency route. It wouldn't cost them as much. There'd be no asset involved. There'd be, you wouldn't lose anybody in a trade. But I just don't think you're going to get an impact guy. As much as I like Dennis Smith Jr., he's a nice defensive-minded guard. But I think I'd rather just play Marcus Sasser, play Malik Beasley, and if you need defense, you go to Ron Holland, you go to Asar Thompson. You have Simone Fontecchio as well that can do some shooting and can play a little bit of defense too. So I don't know if there's a impact free agent out there that can impact the game similarly to how Ivy did. Something else to consider is the contract extension that Jaden Ivey's eligible for this offseason. No indication that that's going to play a factor in whether he returns or not. Certainly not been said by anyone. But he is eligible for an extension this summer. And it's just something to keep in mind of, if he doesn't come back, how does that complicate that contract situation? We don't know where he stands in Trajan Langdon's long-term plan. And had he had a, good rest of the season, continue to trend in the direction that he was trending in when he was on the court, perhaps they would have been able to agree to an extension this upcoming offseason. If he misses the rest of the year, it probably gets a lot more complicated figuring out and settling on a number that both sides are going to feel is right or comfortable. Just something else to consider, as it's just a fact he's extension eligible in the summer. So that's really everything on Jaden Ivey. Just a really, really unfortunate injury at a time where he was really finding his groove. I have a ton of respect for Jaden Ivey. I think the fan base has a ton of respect for everything that he battled through last year in what Cade Cunningham called an interesting 2024, or maybe it was crazy, maybe both last night. But Jaden Ivey battled so much in that 2023-2024 season, and to see him play as well as he had this year, it just sucks to see a guy go down like that. And everybody was so devastated for him. I mean, JB Bickerstaff clearly holding back tears. Asar Thompson holding back tears. A lot of guys were very, very upset. And I just have a lot of respect for Jaden Ivey as, someone who faith is really, really important to me and to my life. Jaden Ivey very vocal about his faith as well, and just very unfortunate, to see him suffer this injury. Obviously, you wish him the best in his recovery. And I think, the news that was given today on Thursday is really fortunate, considering, how scary it looked last night. I've been in arenas, in gyms for some very scary moments. I've been in an arena where a player collapsed and had a seizure on the court in the middle of a game. Last night was a scary moment as well, and I didn't quite see it in the exact moment when the play happened. I don't think most of the players did either. Everyone just kind of, ran up, I think, planning to help him up like you would after, any play where there's a fall. And I think it was Tim Hardaway Jr. who kind of figured out, oh, he's really, really down, and was calling for help from the sideline. I think it caught everyone in shock, probably because it was just such a bang play. And it was just a tense moment. I mean, the arena went dead silent. The energy in the arena just completely left the building as you saw both teams and staff and Little Caesars Arena staff kind of huddle around and cover up Jaden Ivey as they tended to him. It was really just a an unfortunate moment, and obviously, again, wishing Jaden Ivey the best as he now starts his road to recovery. Going to move on now from all of the Jaden Ivey talk, the health status, the where the roster goes, where the rotation goes, where the season goes. We're going to move on from that, and on a brighter note, talk about an overall Pistons team that has won 4 of their last 5 games, went out on the West Coast during the Christmas season and went 3-1, and is playing decent basketball. I'll say, despite winning 4 of their last 5, I don't feel like they've played great basketball. I think they've had some moments defensively where they have looked incredibly lackadaisical and incredibly out of it. The turnovers for this team can be a real pain in the rear, depending on the night. I think they had 11 in the third quarter to Orlando on Wednesday night when Orlando was making their big surge back into the game. But they did win, and they went on the road, and they beat the Phoenix Suns. They beat the Los Angeles Lakers. And in a absolutely crazy comeback run, they stunned the Sacramento Kings. 3 quality wins against 3 quality teams, at least comparatively to the Pistons. I get Phoenix has kind of suffered lately, and I get the Kings have been disappointing this year. But match up those rosters and their quality wins for a young Detroit Piston team. The loss to Denver on the end of the road trip was, I think, inevitable. I think if you look at what had to happen for them to come back and beat Sacramento, it just felt like they were ready to go home, which is oftentimes how it works when you go on a long road trip. I think it was only exasperated when it was a long road trip that went through before and after Christmas. You're not with your family in your home. You're on the road. Maybe they're with you, maybe they're not. You're ready to get home. You're ready to sleep in your own bed. You're ready to get in your own gym, your own arena, your own house, whatever. You're ready to be home. And it just, what's unfortunate is the Pistons actually played a good first half against the Nuggets and then just completely fell apart in the second half to Denver. But a 3-1 road trip, and then that win against Orlando, 4 of their last 5, with the Chicago Bulls loss last night. They jumped into 9th. The Pistons jumped into 9th in the Eastern Conference. And you look at the schedule ahead for them. The Hornets, who they've lost 2 very close games to. They get the Timberwolves on Saturday. What sucks is that that's a back-to-back. The Pistons just had, 3-4 days off after that road trip and then played Orlando. And then they get a day off and go right into a back-to-back. It just feels like the scheduling could have spaced those games out a little bit better. But nonetheless, Charlotte, which becomes a really big game in terms of you need to get this win knowing you've got to play tomorrow night against the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that can be really, really deadly. And then after that, they get the Blazers and they get the Nets next Monday, next Wednesday. And then they wrap up that week with a Golden State team that has been hit or miss. I want to say they have lost 7 of their last 10. I will double check that here. Yeah, they have lost 7 of their last 10 games. And then they wrap up next week with a Toronto team that has won 1 of their last 10. So you look at 5 of their next 6 as winnable games. I think, you look at the schedule, it's the game against Minnesota is a scheduled loss, quote unquote. So maybe that's the game the Pistons end up winning with how they've played this year. But very much a chance for them to continue to trend in the right direction record-wise. They're going to need to clean up some things. The defense, like I mentioned, has been an issue at times. The turnovers have been an issue at times. And quite frankly, even in the Orlando game, Cade Cunningham was in the first half really good. I think he finished with 4 3-pointers. Jaden Ivey made 5. Tobias Harris made 3s. Malik Beasley actually had his worst game in, I think, forever as a Piston, maybe his worst Piston game of all time. He actually did not make many shots, but the 3-point shooting overall yesterday was really good for the Pistons. The defense was fine. To be fair, they were playing an Orlando team that did not have Paolo Banchero, did not have Franz Wagner, and did not have Mo Wagner. They also didn't have Anthony Black, another key rotation player for them. They were throwing out a starting lineup of it was Jalen Suggs, Tristan Da Silva, Wendell Carter Jr., Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Goga Bitadze. You look at that lineup, and I think Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's probably the best scorer in that group. No offense to KCP. I was on the hashtag PayKCP bandwagon a long time ago, if you were on Pistons Twitter way back when, but that's not a lineup that should necessarily put fear in your heart when you're on the court against them. So the Pistons didn't have to play great. Again, they only scored 106 points. The second half was pretty poor for them. But they beat a team that, quite frankly, they should have beaten. They have some things to figure out. Like, I don't want to sit here and say, oh, they've won 4 of their last 5, but they're not playing good basketball. That's not true. They've won 4 of their last 5, playing, I think, not as good as basketball as they're capable of. They've had some moments where the defense has looked really good. They've had some moments where the defense has looked really bad. The turnovers, like I said, have been incredibly inconsistent. One night they'll have 7. One night they'll have 11 and a quarter. So a lot of cleaning up to do for the Pistons, and we'll see how their morale is with the absence of Jaden Ivey. If the reporting is true and there's optimism and belief that he could be back this year, I don't think there's going to be a ton of sulking and a ton of bad attitude. And it would surprise me if there is. JB Bickerstaff runs a really tight and good ship. He does a great job of keeping everyone engaged, and they have veterans that have done a really good job of keeping the morale at a high level. But how do they perform without Jaden Ivey now is going to be, a really, really interesting thing to watch and a tall task for this team, because Jaden Ivey was their second leading scorer. He was their second best distributor. He was one of their better 3-point shooters this year. Statistically, he was second on the team, only behind Malik Beasley in 3-point shooting percentage. It's a big task to fill. So this light schedule that they have ahead of them, not light, but easier schedule, that should help them kind of refine their footing with having to adjust on the fly and replace such a significant loss in their rotation. So the Pistons are trending in the right direction. You win 4 of your last 5, you go on the road, and you win 3 of 4 against quality teams. You're trending in the right direction. But it's weird to be sitting here and feeling like there's just another gear for this team. There's another level that they could really get to. But it gets a lot harder to get there without Jaden Ivey, who, again, was playing really good basketball. One other thing I wanted to talk about was Paul Reed. I wrote about this on palaceofpistons.com earlier this week. That the piece dropped on Wednesday morning. But I wrote about Paul Reed, who, during that Western Conference road trip, played incredibly well. I mean, what he does for this team defensively is remarkable. He is a stocks king. And if you don't know, a stock is just the combination of blocks and steals together. He blocks shots at an incredibly high rate, and he generates steals at an incredibly high rate. He's also a really good facilitator out of the 5 spot. Just a willing and smart passer. And so when Isaiah Stewart returned against the Denver Nuggets and Paul Reed lost his spot in the rotation, was a little disappointed. And it was, not lost on me that when the Pistons made that super late comeback against Denver with Paul Reed getting some minutes and playing that fourth quarter against a lot of it against Nikola Jokic, it wasn't lost on me that he was a catalyst alongside Ron Holland and Marcus Sasser and Asar Thompson. It wasn't lost on me that he was a catalyst in that comeback effort. He plays really high energy basketball. And I know it's tough because you have Jalen Duren, who looked good against Orlando, and you get back Isaiah Stewart, who is going to get rotation minutes for this team as long as he's on it. But is there a way to get Paul Reed some minutes in the rotation every night? Dare I say you maybe look at some two big lineups? I don't know. I just feel kind of like how I felt in the offseason when they claimed him. He's just kind of too good to be out of your rotation. If he was in the rotation of a playoff team, which he was last year for the Sixers, how is he not in the rotation for this team? And that's not, some shot at JB Bickerstaff or the Pistons staff overall. I'm just thinking out loud. I just think he's played well enough. And the energy's there and the intensity's there. And he's not a guy that, he doesn't get the ball and he sulks and he doesn't go as hard and he hunts his own shot when he does get that touch. No, he makes a lot of right plays and he can finish at the rim. He can hit the baseline jumper. He can hit the occasional three-point shot. He's just able to do so many different things. And when he does that while also playing with the energy and intensity that he does, man, I just think it's hard to keep him off the court. So I'll be watching if anything changes with where Paul Reed stands in Detroit's rotation. Not necessarily saying he needs to usurp Jalen Duren or Isaiah Stewart, but is there a way to get him some minutes and to at least let him compete for a role? Because it felt like, quite frankly, he earned it when he was out there during the Western Conference road trip. He did not play against the Magic on Wednesday, and he was not going to play against Denver until it turned into a blowout and JB Bickerstaff threw in the end of his bench. So that's another storyline I'm kind of watching. I'm curious what everyone else is thinking. I was going to come into today talking about some New Year's resolutions for the Pistons, probably something that you're going to hear on other podcasts throughout, the venues that cover this team. But the Jaden Ivey situation obviously changed where this show was headed and took up a large chunk of the conversation today, and rightfully so, because you have a player that was playing so well, is such a key piece for this team. Just had the game winner against Sacramento the other night and was trending in such a great direction. And just to see him, go down in such a scary manner, you just hate it. You hate it because he's been through so much and he's fought through so much adversity. And, JB Bickerstaff said it last night after the game. It's just that's the last guy it should happen to. With how invested he is, he cares more than anybody else. It just, not that it should happen to anyone, obviously, but it sucks that it had to be Jaden Ivey with where he was and how this season was shaping up for him. Really, really interested to see how the Pistons move from here on out. There have been no reports about roster moves, trade market, free agent market indications from the Detroit Pistons. Obviously, that could change as every hour progresses, and we'll keep you updated on our socials if anything does change. But if I were the Pistons, I would definitely be looking at doing something to bolster this team, who's going to be without one of its most dynamic players for the foreseeable future. I'm curious, what does everyone else think? Should the Pistons be making a move? Should they be looking to make a trade? How does the rotation change? Who should move into the starting lineup? Again, I really like the idea of Marcus Sasser. I just think it makes a lot of sense if you're going to find some minutes for him and allows you to pair him with Cade Cunningham, keep a good shooter on the court, with him, and a guy that can also do some of the playmaking and facilitating more than someone like, a Malik Beasley might be able to. And it allows Beasley to kind of come in off the bench and be that microwave type scorer that he's been off the bench for them this year. Not that he can't start. Not that he's probably the most likely guy. Not that he's probably not the most likely guy. Now I'm losing my words. He's probably the most likely guy to get the starting spot. And it's not me saying he's not worthy of it. I just think I'd look at Marcus Sasser for what he can do to come in and start and play minutes and help this team. I just think that's a good fit for him. But I'm very curious what everyone else thinks. Who moves into that starting spot, who gets a bigger role here. Maybe you think it should be Asar Thompson. Maybe you think it should be Ron Holland because it gives them a little bit of a boost defensively. I just have questions about how it works for them offensively as a team that on a nightly basis can really struggle to score the basketball. I just don't know if either of those guys is the right fit to jump in there. But I'm curious what everyone else thinks. Let me know in the comments below. That is going to do it for this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. Again, wherever you watch or listen to the show from, please go on, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, hit the like button, leave us that 5-star rating, leave us that 5-star review. It means the absolute world to me and would help us get off on a great note to knock the doors open in 2025. Make sure you're subscribed to our Substack, palaceofpistons.com as well. You're going to get all of our content sent directly to your email inbox, completely free of charge as soon as it's published to our website. It would tremendously help us if you did that as well. We just reached a milestone about a week or so ago, and in our number of subscribers, would like to keep knocking down milestones, to be quite frank. And we have a long, long way to go in 2025 in order to do so. So please continue to show your support. We really, really appreciate it. If there's anything that you want us to discuss, if there's a topic, a player, definitely let us know in the comments. Like, always looking for what people want to hear us talk about, and it helps us give you guys a better show each week. So make sure to do that. Wishing you all a great start to 2025. I hope this year is everything that you hope of it to be. So excited for what's in store this upcoming year. So again, thanks so much for tuning in to this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. And we'll see you all next week.